Bumpy Johnson steps off the curb with $1 million in cash, riding close to his ribs, and the room turns cold. Every enemy eye says, "Take it." Every friend expects gunfire. He doesn't even hurry. Night leans on the avenue like a hand on a throat. A sedan idles at the corner, its windows dark. Bumpy Johnson steps down from the curb, and the street seems to notice him, slowly, unwillingly, like a dog recognizing the boot that once taught it manners. He wears no hurry, no show. The coat hangs clean, the brim low, and beneath it his eyes stay level. Close to his ribs, a satchel rides heavy. The weight is not just money, it is a consequence. Across the way, the door he's headed for glows warm, friendly. But the warmth is a lie. Inside that light are men who don't call his name unless they mean to stain it. Enemy territory, neutral ground only on paper. A lookout shifts his stance when he sees Bumpy. Another man's laughter thins out, as if cut. The sidewalk clears, nobody wants to be too close when a storm chooses where to break. Bumpy crosses the street without looking left or right. He has already looked. He has already decided. At the doorway, a thick-necked man blocks him, smiling like he's doing a favor. "Evening," the man says, soft as a threat. Bumpy lets the silence sit first. Then, calm as prayer, move. The smile falters. A glance over the man's shoulder. Permission sought, permission not granted. The block remains for a breath too long. Bumpy's hand rests on the satchel strap. Not reaching, not warning. Just resting. The gesture tells every watching eye the same thing. This money will not be taken, and this man will not be rushed. Behind the door, chairs scrape. A glass stops midair. Somewhere inside, a voice murmurs, "Let him in." The thick-necked man steps aside. Bumpy enters the light, carrying Harlem with him. The room receives him the way a church receives a sinner, quiet, watchful, ready to judge. Smoke curls. Under the ceiling, thick as old grudges. Men sit spaced apart like they've measured the angle a bullet might travel. Their suits are good, their eyes are better. Every face wears the same question. Is he brave, or is he stupid? Bumpy doesn't answer it. He doesn't need to. He walks in with the satchel close, not clutched, not hidden. The $1 million is a rumor made solid. It changes the air the way a gun changes the air. Everybody respects the weight, nobody admits it. A waiter passes too near, then veers away like he brushed against heat. At the back, a man with a hard jaw whispers to another, and both stop speaking when Bumpy's shadow reaches them. They know his name, even if they never say it right. They know Harlem behind it, storefronts that stay open, rent that gets paid, families that eat when the winter tries to teach hunger. They think the money is for Bumpy. But Bumpy knows better. In his mind, the satchel isn't cash. It's a row of faces. The old woman who runs the candy shop and keeps a broom by the door like it's a badge. The preacher who takes donations with one hand and prays for protection with the other. The boys on the corner who look tough until they hear a mother cry. The men who work all day and still fall short, but stand tall because Harlem is all they've got. Those people don't step into rooms like this. They don't get invited. They don't get seats. Bumpy carries them anyway. He passes a mirror and catches himself for a moment. Not vanity, just inventory. His tie is straight. His breathing is slow. A man can't walk into enemy ground carrying community money and let fear show, because fear spreads. Fear makes the weak reckless and the reckless loud. Harlem doesn't survive loud. A voice from a booth cuts through the smoke. Bumpy. It's like a test, like a nail tapping glass. Bumpy turns his head just enough to acknowledge the sound. Not a nod, not a smile, just a look that says, I heard you. I'm not impressed. He moves to the center of the room where the light is honest and the witnesses have clear sightlines. He chooses that spot on purpose. If something happens, everyone will see who started it. Everyone will remember who held steady. He sets the satchel on a table, gentle as placing a Bible down. And for the first time since he entered, the room feels what he brought with him. Not money, authority. They don't rise to greet him. That's the first lesson they try to teach. You're not our equal. They stay seated, spread out in their booths like they own the air itself. The closest man to Bumpy's table rolls a cigarette slowly, like time belongs to him. Bumpy stands anyway. Across the room, a heavier presence sits in the darkest corner, surrounded by men who don't laugh too loud. The kind of man who doesn't threaten. He lets the world threaten on his behalf. His eyes come up, then drift down again, as if Bumpy is something placed on the table for inspection. A thin man with neat hands approaches. His smile is polite, but his shoes are too quiet. Mr. Johnson, he says, careful with the syllables, you brought quite a statement. Bumpy's gaze stays on the man's face, not the smile. I brought what I brought. The thin man tilts his head, acting amused. A lot of weight to carry into the wrong neighborhood. Bumpy doesn't flinch at the word wrong. He lets it sit there, disrespect dressed as geography. Neighborhoods don't scare me, he says. Men do sometimes. Depends on the man. The thin man laughs, but it comes out hollow. He glances towards the corner, toward approval, then turns back as if he's been granted permission to sharpen his tone. You know what people say, he asks. That you think Harlem makes you untouchable. Bumpy's voice stays low. People say plenty. Most of it is noise. The thin man leans in, lowering his voice like they're sharing a secret. $1,000,000 is loud. Bumpy looks down at the satchel, then back up. Only if a man plans to steal it. That lands, not as a threat, worse, as a certainty. A chair scrapes somewhere behind Bumpy, a slow movement meant to be heard. Another scrape follows closer. The room is arranging itself. Men with hands in pockets, men shifting their coats, the choreography of an ambush that wants to look like an accident. Bumpy doesn't turn around. He keeps his hands visible, relaxed. He breathes in through his nose, letting the smoke and heat fill his lungs. And he thinks of Harlem again, not as a place, but as a promise. If he panics here, it won't just be his blood. It will be the lesson people carry home. That enemy ground can make Bumpy Johnson bend. The thin man watches him closely, disappointed he isn't sweating. We could make this easy, he says. You leave the bag, you walk out, everybody stays happy. Bumpy's eyes narrow, not with anger, but with focus. Happy ain't what you're offering, he says. You're offering me a future where every man in every room thinks he can take what's mine. His voice stays calm, but it starts to take up space. I don't buy that future. In the corner, the heavier presence finally speaks. Just 2 words, slow and unimpressed. Proceed then. And the room tightens, waiting to see if Bumpy bleeds. The thin man steps back like he's clearing a stage. That's what this is now, a performance. The room leans in without leaning. Cigarettes burn down to their fingers. Glasses stop halfway to mouths. Nobody wants to miss the moment Bumpy Johnson finally acts like the animal they've been calling him. A larger man drifts from the side, built like a doorframe, face blank as stone. He doesn't speak to Bumpy. He speaks past him, to the room. "Can't believe he walked in here with it," he says, loud enough for everyone. "Like he owns the place." A few chuckles answer. Not honest chuckles, paid chuckles, the kind that try to make a man feel alone. Bumpy looks at him the way you look at a stranger's dog that's barking too hard, measuring whether it's dangerous or just hungry. He doesn't take the bait. He doesn't explain himself. He doesn't remind them who he is. He lets them feel what it's like to throw rocks into a pond and get no splash back. The larger man smiles, misreading that quiet as fear. He steps closer to the table, eyes dropping to the satchel like it's already his. "That's a lot of money," he says. "It would be a shame if something happened to it." He reaches out, not fast, not bold, slow, like a man trying to claim property with politeness. The room holds its breath. This is an insult, the public touch, the test. Bumpy's hand comes up and rests over the satchel strap, not yanking it away, not striking, just covering it, calm, protective, final. He looks up at the larger man. "Don't," he says. It's one word. It lands like a door closing. The larger man's smile thins. "Or what?" he asks, loud again. He wants witnesses. He wants Bumpy to erupt, to become the story they'll tell after. He couldn't control himself. He had to spill blood. Bumpy's eyes don't change. His voice stays even. "Or you'll learn something you don't want to learn in front of people you can't impress." A ripple of quiet moves across the room. Discomfort, not laughter. Because the threat isn't the words. It's the restraint behind them. Men like this are used to heat, to shout, to brandished steel. They know how to respond to rage. They don't know how to respond to a man who can afford patience. The larger man tries again. Closer now, his breath sour with whiskey. He leans in, letting his shoulder bump Bumpy's arm. Another public disrespect, disguised as clumsiness. "Harlem doesn't reach this far," he murmurs. Bumpy doesn't step back. He doesn't step forward. He just turns his head slightly as if listening to a distant sound, then softly, "Harlem reaches wherever I stand." The words don't swell. They don't beg for attention. They just exist, undeniable. A chair scrapes again, closer this time. Someone behind Bumpy shifts position. A hand brushes fabric. A concealed weight moves. Bumpy still doesn't turn. He lifts his eyes past the larger man, towards the corner where the heavy presence watches. Bumpy doesn't plead. He doesn't ask. His look says, "You invited me here. You're responsible for what happens next." The heavy presence doesn't blink. The larger man sees that glance and decides to force the issue. He grabs the satchel strap, fingers tightening. That's the moment the room expects violence. Bumpy's other hand moves, not to strike, not to reach for a weapon, just to take the man's wrist. Firm, controlled, a grip with no shaking, no fury. He holds him like a father, holding a misbehaving son, still enough to hear the lesson. Bumpy leans in, voice low enough that only the man can hear it. But the stillness makes everyone watch anyway. "You touch what I carry," Bumpy says, "and you answer to every mouth in Harlem that depends on it." The larger man swallows. He tries to pull away. Bumpy doesn't let him, just long enough to make him feel small. Then Bumpy releases him. Not because he's afraid, because he's finished. And in that release, the room understands Bumpy isn't here to fight. He's here to decide who gets to keep their pride. The larger man rubs his wrist like it's bruised, though Bumpy left no mark. That's the cruelty of control. No evidence, just the memory of being held still. Bumpy turns his attention back to the room, not to the man. He sets his palm on the satchel once, a quiet claim, then slides it towards the center of the table as if offering terms to fate itself. No speeches, no bargaining face, just an action that says, "Here it is, now show me what kind of man you are." The thin man returns, smile rebuilt, but weaker now. "This doesn't have to be difficult," he says, too polite to be honest. Bumpy's eyes settle on him. "It already is," he answers. "You made it that way when you tried to embarrass me." The thin man's jaw tightens. "We're businessmen, Mr. Johnson. We're discussing arrangements." Bumpy nods once, barely. "Then discuss them like businessmen, not like thieves." A low chuckle comes from somewhere, cut off immediately. Nobody knows if laughing is safe. In the corner, the heavy presence leans forward for the first time. His hands appear, thick fingers, clean nails. The room seems to orient toward him like iron filings toward a magnet. He looks at the satchel. $1 million, he says, savoring the number. A lot of trust. Bumpy doesn't correct him. "It's not trust," he replies. "It's payment." The heavy presence's eyes narrow. "Payment for what?" Bumpy speaks slowly, each word placed with care like stones along a riverbed. "For peace, for passage, for the right to keep Harlem from drowning in your appetite." A murmur stirs, offended pride rising around the room. Bumpy doesn't rush to soften it. He continues, calm as judgment. "This money buys you profit without blood. It buys you a street that stays quiet. It buys you my word, so long as your men don't act hungry in public." The thin man lifts his hands. "And if we refuse?" Bumpy's gaze drifts over the faces. Men who came here expecting a spectacle and found a mirror instead. "Then you don't get the money," he says, "and you don't get what comes with it." The heavy presence studies him. "And what comes with it?" Bumpy's answer is simple. Order. Silence takes the room. Not an empty silence, a working silence, counting, weighing. These men understand order. They live off chaos, but they fear disorder. Disorder makes guns cheap and bodies expensive. Disorder brings attention. Bumpy stands there steady, making them choose. Finally, the heavy presence exhales, slow, like he's letting go of a grudge. He nods once, small, but visible, a signal. Around the room, men straighten, eyes drop, shoulders loosen. Not submission in words, worse, submission in posture. They don't clap. They don't congratulate me. They acknowledge. And in that acknowledgement, every mobster in the room bows without meaning to. Bumpy doesn't linger for gratitude. He doesn't collect it. He lets the room sit with its own decision, the way a man lets a wound sting so it remembers how it got there. The heavy presence gestures, and the thin man moves fast now, too fast, opening the satchel, counting with eyes that don't dare look pleased, bills stacked like bricks. The number isn't the point anymore. The point is that Bumpy brought it here and didn't lose himself. A man in the back mutters something about respect. Another shushes him before the word turns into a joke. Even the air feels disciplined. Bumpy watches none of it. He buttons his coat, smooth and unhurried. When he turns to leave, the larger man, door-frame shoulders, whiskey breath, steps aside without being asked. His pride stays in his chest like a swallowed stone. At the doorway, Bumpy pauses, not for theatrics, for principle. He looks back once, letting his eyes pass over the men who tried to make him bleed in public. His voice is quiet enough that it doesn't feel like a threat, but it carries because no one is breathing. "Harlem stays Harlem," he says. "You do your business, I do mine, and nobody has to get buried over vanity." He lets that sit, then adds softer, "Don't make me come back for the wrong reason." Outside, the night hits him clean, cold, honest. The sedan still idles at the corner. The street is the same, but it isn't. News travels faster than cars. By morning, barbershops will repeat it with careful smiles. Store owners will tell it like prayer. Boys on the corner will straighten their backs when they say his name. Not because Bumpy fought, because he didn't, because he walked into a room full of men who believed fear was the only language, and spoke to them in restraint until they answered in respect. That's how legacy forms in Harlem, not with banners, with rules that hold when the lights are low. $1 million changed hands that night. But what Harlem kept was worth more. A man who could stand in enemy territory and make power look calm.